Good evening and welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. We have a big night in store for you. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome. This is our live Election Day headquarters studio. We are here at the Heritage Foundation. I am so excited to be spending the night with you, and it's going to be a long night. I'm just going to tell you right now, the beautiful thing is you can stay with us all night long. Let me just lay out for you real quickly the schedule. If you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble or listening to it, we are going to do the show, and then we will go live back again on YouTube across platforms at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have it all. I will bring in my colleagues from the First Television Network. We will simulcast with them. Then we'll team up with the folks at the morning meeting at some point and go live with Megyn Kelly. The beautiful thing is you stay here with us all night on our YouTube channel or whatever platform you'd like, and you will see it all. You don't have to go anywhere. We'll bring everything into you. That's how we've set up tonight. We're going to have some special guests. We've got it all set up. The folks at the Heritage Foundation have been so amazing, so accommodating. We're going to have information flowing to us all night long. So we've got a lot to break down. But the key thing about today is today we will set it all up for you. And then when this show ends, if you're watching on the first, we will start to go live. We will have it all for you. The latest poll results, Kentucky, Indiana are coming in. Then we'll see North Carolina and Virginia. We'll get some early results in some of those key 7 o'clock, 7:30 states. But we will be live from 8 p.m. Eastern, at least until midnight. Don't worry. We got you covered all night long. So this is what you can expect. We're going to see a lot right out of the bat off of Indiana and Kentucky. We'll bring you those results when we have them. Then those other early vote states, we'll bring those in as well. Some great data, though, for you. I get a lot of people that ask me all day long, what are you feeling? What are you seeing? Well, here's the thing. I don't care about yard signs. I don't care that your uncle waited in a long line and he's never had to wait before. The bottom line is, what does the data tell us? I talked to Jessica Anderson last night at the Sentinel Action Fund, and I asked, where are we? She told me about Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick, the Senate candidate down there, which is where they're tracking, is only down 404,000 votes. Now, that may seem like a lot, but Joe Biden was ahead by 1.3 million in the early vote. This is great news, folks. Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes. We are in great shape there. That's awesome for us. The goal for McCormick was to put him in a strong position for him and Trump in Pennsylvania. Solid there. In Ohio, another great story for Bernie Moreno. I know we're not looking at that presidentially, but it's key to a Republican Senate. Bernie Moreno is leading in-person votes by 121,000, behind in mail ballots by 74,000, but that gives him a slight edge going into Election Day. And the key thing, by the way, we keep talking about who's voting. In Ohio, we see that of the 1.2 million Republican early votes cast, 300,000 are low propensity voters. These are not people who normally turn out. This is great news for Donald Trump and Bernie Moreno there in Ohio. In Montana, Sheehy, the candidate there, up 19,945 votes in early votes. Another great thing happening there. Nevada, another amazing story. Jackie Rosen has taken the lead in early votes by about 8,000 votes, but Sam Brown, who we've had on the show before, still leads with in-person voting by 51,941 votes. So this is great news. Of the 671 votes cast early by Republicans, 216,000 were low propensity voters, or 47%. Again, these are the people that the Republicans really wanted to get out and vote early and bank those votes, and then hope that people who are high propensity Election Day voters do what they always do, go out and vote today. I hope you have. All right, so we've got a great panel to kick off the night. As I said, we're going to be staying on this stream. We'll bring in the folks from First. We're going to be joined by the folks from the morning meeting and go on Megyn Kelly. We'll be all over the map all night long, but you can stay with us here. So if you're watching on the stream, stay with us. If you're watching on the First, stay with us. No matter what, we'll bring you the results as they come in. We'll be your guide throughout the night, back channeling to the campaigns, finding out what's going on, giving you our best predictions as to where this thing is headed. All right, without further introduction, I'm kicking off today with an amazing panel. Reagan Reese, she is the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Ryan Walker is the Executive Vice President of Heritage for Action for America. And Hans von Spakovsky is the leading expert when it comes to legal reform, all of these questions that I get asked about the reforms that have made. Hans is the leading expert in the country for this stuff on election law. I'm excited to bring them in and kick off this discussion with you today. All right, panel, thanks for being here. Happy Election Day. Good to see you all. Thank you to our Heritage folks for being such crazy. Oh, this is really nice. As Reagan said as we were getting ready, it's nice to actually be in person to see folks and not at a home studio. Hans, I want to start with you. The question I get most from everyone is, what has changed from 2020 to ensure that the integrity of the vote is something that we can believe in?
We are generally better off nationally than we were in 2020. The reason for that is many states actually realized after the 2020 election that there were vulnerabilities, and they passed big reforms. Georgia, as you know, passed a huge reform package. North Carolina finally got its voter ID law in place. So many states improved things, but it all depends on what state you're in. Because some states...
Well, look at Nevada, right? 3 days and no postmark. I don't understand. Like, to me, you mail everyone a ballot, then you say, we'll count ballots till 3 days later and you don't need a postmark. Like, I even get that, which is, hey, if we come up short, let's go find some ballots and mail them.
Right, and Nevada is one of the examples of the states that not only didn't make things better, they got worse. And the worst thing about Nevada, too, is, remember, during COVID, they put in an emergency rule to mail an absentee ballot to every registered voter. They made that permanent after the election, and their voter registration list is so bad that they have multiple lawsuits pending against them because they have people, well, supposedly people, registered at casinos, gas stations.
I remember when I used to live at the casinos. Those were the good days, and I'd wake up at the casino, and then I'd vote and go have breakfast. Oh, the good days. But do we have to be, like, when people ask me, Sean, do we have to be worried? What's the answer you would give them?
It depends on the state you're in.
Depends on the state.
Really? I mean,
yeah, of course.
So in March, I did this investigation into the state of election integrity because conservatives are so worried about it. And no one on the RNC could say to me, you know, what happened in 2020 is not going to happen again in 2024. Complete vibe shift. Now people are, you know, officials are coming to me and saying, what happened in 2020 is not going to happen in 2024. Americans should feel confident casting their vote.
I remember that story that you did. It was, I think it sent chills through people, but you are on the, I mean, do you think that the RNC and the right writ large has gotten the message?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you the other big difference is that, look, Democrats once again have been filing lawsuits trying to change the rules at the last moment. But this time, both the RNC, which really built up its litigation arm, and the Trump campaign, they've been in court right away. So, for example, just within the last day or so, when some of the big democratically controlled counties in Georgia were trying to exclude observers from early voting sites, they immediately went to court and got that stopped. So they are reacting immediately when those rules are trying to be changed by the left. And it's, you know, typical tactics. Rather than playing by the rules in place and trying to win the election, they're trying to change the rules, manipulate it.
It's funny to me, and I don't know what you're hearing, Ryan, but I feel like there was this, they call them chyrons on a TV screen, right? With the banner that you read. And it said, Trump stokes fear. I'm like, no. Trump went to court in Pennsylvania and said, you guys were stopping early voting. Right? And won. And then the media was like, the headlines were Trump stokes fears. I'm like, no. He actually pointed out that this democracy that you all say is under attack was happening, and they fought and won.
Well, that's right. I think what we've seen from Laura Trump and Michael Whatley, who's newly over at the RNC, has completely changed this election cycle. Yeah. They're talking about having 500 lawyers on the ground in each of the battleground states this year. And just last night, the Georgia case to allow 3,000 absentee ballots after Election Day, we successfully challenged that all the way up to the Georgia Supreme Court. And they accepted our version of the truth and election law. And so I think that we're more prepared this year, this cycle, than we were certainly in 2020. To effectuate the outcome that we all want.
Reagan, when you're in the White House briefing room. Okay. There's the answer. I get, like, I think that the media has stepped up. Like, they're like, okay, we tried Russia hoax 2016. We buried the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020, but they're now all in. You watch CBS News, and I don't watch it. I see the clips just so people don't. Okay, but Nora O'Donnell, Margaret Brennan, then you look over George Stephanopoulos giving this soliloquy the other day about the country is at stake. I mean, it was clearly like a don't vote for Trump speech, right? But the leaps and bounds by which these guys are like, hey, sorry, we got to go all in. Do you get that sense among the folks that are in the briefing room?
I think the easiest answer I can give you is Politico Playbook has become more unreadable than it has ever become. And one of the authors of that, Eugene Daniels, is the president of the WHCA.
Oh, no, but he's also, like, I believe, auditioning. He thinks that Kamala's going to win. He's auditioning to be her press secretary. Yeah. Right up there with some of the guys from NBC. Right. I mean, I've never seen...
You would know best, yeah.
But I feel like, in all honesty, I don't think this is going to happen. But if she were to win, I guarantee you one of those folks from in the White House Correspondents Association becomes the press secretary. They are auditioning on a daily basis.
Well, in this week, the past 2 weeks, there's been this narrative that came out that all of a sudden the Trump campaign stalled. And it was a narrative picked up by every single mainstream media outlet from here to Kingdom Come, but there was no inflection point that they could point to.
I'm glad you brought that up because I get that. Like I said it to Hans and Reagan as we were getting ready. In 2016, I felt like everyone kept saying, the New York Times, 95-5, you guys can't win, but the gut felt good, the rallies, everything I kept seeing. And I always like to tell people, like, don't, like, yard signs don't vote, offices don't vote, people do. So until you have data, don't. But this time it's the opposite. The data is clear. Yes. The data says we are crushing it on the ground. But is it the media just trying to counter it?
Well, I think things have gotten weird. I'm going to take that from Tim Walz. And I think there was this weird media narrative around that Atlantic piece and Kelly's comments about calling Trump a fascist and a Nazi. And I really felt like the media failed there and really got behind Kamala Harris and was this giant machine because they allowed her to give these unexpected remarks from her residence, call Trump a fascist, call him a Nazi, and there was no questioning, aside from the media on the right, of the integrity of that piece. There were all the other elements of that story came under fire. There were people who were on the record saying this story just doesn't corroborate with what we want to, what we know is the truth. And there was no questioning. There were softball questions that Karine got in the press briefing asking, does the president think that Donald Trump is a fascist? And then Kamala Harris just continues to parrot that. And so I think that is kind of, when we talk about this stalling feeling, I think that's where that came from. The media kind of getting behind Kamala Harris in this midnight hour.
Look, I want to say something about this. Look, you may disagree with Donald Trump and his policy, but this theme of this propaganda war of calling him a fascist, calling him a Nazi, saying he's Adolf Hitler, that is outrageous. And listen, Sean, I say that as, I'm first generation. My mother was German. She grew up in Nazi Germany. And it is an insult to the people who suffered under Nazism and Hitler to make that kind of a claim, and they need to stop it. If you want to criticize policies, do that. But those kind of terms, that's the kind of thing that I think, will push people towards violence.
Listen, not just violence. I totally agree with you. But the thing is, this whole mantra of Hitler, democracy being under attack. Right. I mean, I voted. We all voted.
We all voted.
That's the fundamental tenet of democracy. A democracy is people being able to go out and vote for. And the only campaign that actually, or the party that tried to stop people from voting, is the Democratic Party. They stopped Donald Trump from getting on the ballot in Maine and Colorado. They stopped Jill Stein from getting on the ballot in several states, the Green Party candidate, and they stopped RFK. They're an equal opportunity democracy hater. They hate everybody challenging them. You want to talk about dictator and autocratic tendencies. They are trying to keep people from having choices. They're the party that's doing this. And then they use words like Hitler, and it's echoed by the media.
Well, I think there's a good point going back to Georgia and SB 202, which Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden were calling Jim Crow 2.0 back in the day. And Heritage Action and our grassroots activists were on the ground advocating for SB 202. And what's happened this year? Record turnout in Georgia.
I'm so glad. I love that. These guys love to talk about black people don't know how to get an ID and they can't do that. That is so insulting.
It is patronizingly racist.
Yeah.
In fact, listen, all those reforms were good reforms. That's one of the reasons why people ought to be more confident. For example, what that reform bill did is it extended they had a great voter ID law, except it only extended to in-person voting. They stretched it to cover absentee balloting. And that's the kind of thing that states all over the country need to do when so many people are voting by mail.
I want to ask you, I brought this up on the show yesterday, and maybe it's just Sean's pet peeve of the day. But Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels, the longtime executive producer, comes out and says, this is months ago, says, I can't have either candidate on because it would be a violation of the FCC law, which is not true, okay? And the FCC, just so people understand, only governs broadcast stations, not cable. So whether it's CNN, Fox, don't have to worry about it. But that was not true. But then they had a surprise visit from Kamala Harris and Tim Kaine this weekend, which was clearly an attempt to and then played it on every NBC outlet as, oh, guess what? So it's not just the NBC appearance, it's then the residual effect. Hans, they gave Donald Trump equal time.
Yeah.
Okay, but
right.
see, why do you do the yeah? What is the for?
Look, one of the great commissioners on the FCC pointed out that the equal time rule says that if you're going to give time to one candidate, you've got to give at least 7 days of equal time to the other candidate. And so what does Saturday Night Live do? They wait till the last moment when there's not 7 days left in the campaign.
But then the funny thing is, I mean, Reagan, from a media perspective, okay, and I get they're not going to crap on their own, but NBC didn't play. I mean, Lorne Michaels works for NBC. Mm-hmm. He said, we can't do this. And in their world, that's called lying, okay? And yet they played it without any reference to, normally they'd say Trump had previously claimed that da-da-da-da. Well, Saturday Night previously claimed they could never have both on and wouldn't. So two lies, right? That they couldn't and that they wouldn't. They lied on both fronts. And yet NBC just goes on as if, because then they're going to, even this morning, right? So that happened Saturday night. They're still playing the clip today on the Today Show.
Well, yeah, there's no consequences for the left-wing media, and it's so hypocritical with the way that they continue to attack and scrutinize right-wing media. I'm sure that you guys are all aware that we have to be super duper careful. These outlets are watching every word that I put on the page, and it makes me a better journalist. I appreciate that. But does Trump really want to go on SNL?
No. I mean, it's like The View. Do you want to go on? Really?
Yeah.
So
I don't think so. And I also thought it was an interesting choice from SNL to put her on because they were just like mocking her in that Steve Harvey Family Feud clip where they asked her to name something that was in her glove you would find in a glove compartment. And her answer, the Kamala Harris actor, said, well, I came from a middle-class family, and never answered the question.
But they also, I don't know what you guys think, but Ryan, I'll ask you this question because you guys are all over the ground in these races. But like, to me, there was a tell when they brought out Tim Kaine. Okay, so they do the Kamala thing, right? And I think, by the way, just for the record, it was a complete copy of the Jimmy Fallon skit that they did with Donald Trump before he'd ever been a candidate. But then the Tim Kaine thing, and they bring out the skit that says, what's the name? And it was like, he came out and be like, reminder, I'm Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia. And then that was the shtick. They kept doing it. Hung Cao, who is the former retired Navy captain, EOD specialist, running against him, got equal time in just Virginia last night on The Voice. Gosh. But the same thing that Hans was talking about. It's like, they to me, that was the signal that something's going on in Virginia. The bat signal was like, hey, let's go get Tim Kaine, bring him up here, say his name over and over again, let people know that he's running, get people motivated, show like the funny side of Tim, because he got to make fun of himself a little. Yeah. But it wasn't, it's, funny when you're a Democrat is ha ha ha. Funny when you're a Republican is mean spirited. But the Virginia thing is what ticked me off.
Yeah, but the fact that they did that in Virginia, look, it's clear that they're concerned about Virginia because look what we had happen. The Justice Department goes to court to sue the state of Virginia, saying you can't take aliens off the voter rolls. I mean,
we are so. This is unbelievable. You can't. How dare you? Not stop non-citizens from voting, but we're against it.
It's unbelievable. Right. The tendencies that they claim that Donald Trump has, they're exhibiting in real time to the American people now.
Yeah.
And to this further point around last week, the last 2 weeks, and this narrative around the Trump campaign stalling and somehow Harris is all of a sudden having the momentum. Look at the behavior of the campaigns. Where are they? Where are they sending surrogates? They're in New Hampshire. They're in Virginia. She spent the entire day yesterday in Pennsylvania, only starting at 2:30, so late start to her day. But she spent the entire day in Pennsylvania. So I think the tell of the campaign that they have vulnerabilities in states like New Hampshire, Virginia, that's very evident in how they're behaving rather than what they're saying.
Do you know what's ironic about this? Look, the biggest pushers of early voting and voting by mail over the past decade has been the liberal left. And this supposed stalling in the last 2 weeks, well, even if it were true, so what? So many Americans have already voted. We're talking about, the estimates are, I think, between 70 and over 80 million Americans have already voted and had already cast their ballots either through the mail or by in-person early voting by the time the supposed stall was starting to happen.
I want to ask you a question because it's one of the things that I get asked a lot, that I feel passionate about, and you are hands down the nation's leading expert on this issue. So let's just do a little logic. People come into the country illegally. We give them a license because apparently that's cool to do. Then you need a license to register to vote, but that's the bridge too far because you wouldn't possibly vote. But clearly they're on the voter rolls because Virginia just found 1,600 of them. Democrats say that's a bridge too far. You come into the country illegally, but my goodness, you would never sign a form that you just need to attest that you're in the country legally. The media then says there's no evidence of fraud. You know, that one media outlet the other day said even the Heritage Foundation could only find 85 instances of fraud. Number one, my view is, okay, well, that's 85 too many. But give some context to these people in the media that said it doesn't exist. I don't see it. I don't see any of this fraud. It can't possibly happen. Because to me, why would you see it? They got a license. They got to register, then they create a law that says you can't ask, so you've created a foolproof system.
Well, I'll give you an example of what they're totally ignoring, and that's all the cases out there that prosecutors don't go after. And we're talking about Virginia and what they just recently, but actually Virginia since 2014, when this law was first passed in Virginia.
By a Democrat.
Yeah, by a Democrat.
By a Democrat.
Do you know how many aliens they've removed from the voter rolls? 11,000. That's the number, 11,000. Wow. Not a single one of those cases was investigated and prosecuted by the U.S. Justice Department. Now, if they had...
So in other words, you can't find what you're not looking for.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And listen, when I was on an election board 10 years ago in Virginia, we found almost 300 aliens on our rolls. About half of them had voted. We took them off the rolls, sent their names over to the U.S. Justice Department. The U.S. Justice Department did not investigate, did not prosecute. You know who we sent it to? Who was the head of the Public Integrity Section at the time? A guy named Jack Smith.
But he's busy these days.
Yeah.
All right, let me just ask you one last question, and then we can get off this subject because we've got a lot of election stuff to get to. What do we need to get right? I mean, today is election day, so it's too late. But going forward, how can we, if Donald Trump wins tonight big, what are the steps federally, congressionally that we need to do to make sure that we put this discussion to end and we don't have to worry about concerns about election integrity going forward? Or is it a state issue?
It's mostly a state issue, but remember, just within the past month, both Florida and Texas have sued the Department of Homeland Security because the Department of Homeland Security refuses to give them access to the DHS databases to check the citizenship status of registered voters. That is something that DHS could easily do, but it takes a president ordering them to do that.
Well, there's another reason.
There are two things real quick that Congress could do. The SAVE Act, which would require states to remove these illegals from their rolls. And then two, the Equal Representation Act, which I think is arguably more important in the census. So it does not count illegals toward the census count for each of these states.
By the way, don't you think that when I'll ask it to you in a second, but the idea that I don't think most Americans fully appreciate the fact that if you're in the country illegally, you get counted in our census. So let's say that there are 500,000 people illegally in the country in, just pick a district, Texas 20. That gives them halfway to a representative in Congress.
That's right.
I mean, how insane is that?
Right.
But when you guys are talking to candidates, which is what a Heritage Action does a lot of. Where are they on like issues like this? Is this something that if we retain a Republican majority tonight, that there's a lot of willingness to go down this road?
Oh, absolutely. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson in the House, have been pushing the SAVE Act for a number of months now. I think it would be top of mind for a Trump administration and Congress acting in the first 100 days, 6 months. I think arguably he'll only have 18 months to get much done legislatively, but that will be top of mind. An Equal Representation Act is something that Heritage Action will be pushing significantly. And candidates take that up. They're hearing it on the trail. Their constituencies or future constituencies are demanding this. It's common sense to the American people.
Reagan, you got these polls now that show a majority of Americans support mass deportation, something that President Trump's been talking about. The funny thing is, I don't see the media coverage. This would be an issue that I think would normally get a lot of coverage outside of the Daily Caller where you work. Do you get the sense that people might start to cover it differently if Donald Trump returns?
Yeah, I think you can already see the media and the way that they're going to change to cover things by the way that they covered, for example, Harris's proposal for tax on tips versus Donald Trump's tax on tips.
One good, one bad.
Exactly. And it was the same with the child tax credit. One was good, one was bad. And so, I think that those statistics will probably get airtime if I have to make a prediction. But for some reason, the Americans are going to be cast as stupid or disillusioned because that's what we've seen so far. The same way that the Biden administration and the media has downplayed Americans' concerns about the economy. The economy is great. You are just crazy for thinking that your grocery bill being $300 a week is too high. And so I just expect that these things, the way that they're going to be covered, are going to be insulting to the American people.
Well, they'll spend 4 years trying to drag Trump through the mud, right? And so they're going to showcase deportation efforts as separating families, putting kids in cages. That whole narrative that happened in the first administration will come right back around. And I would love to think that the media will change its tune come after Election Day, but I've seen no evidence of that and don't have much hope that they'll cover anything differently.
And in particular, look, we just saw this when, the evidence came out, a month ago, about the huge numbers of known criminal aliens convicted of murder, rape, arson, etc., that the administration, instead of detaining them, had let loose into the country. And it's a huge number. And did you see any PR about this, any publicity? No, hardly anybody covered it.
Cool, because it wasn't negative.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, what do you think, if I know where we are time-wise, right? I mean, so pretty much, unless you live on the West Coast, like, hopefully you voted. But if somebody's undecided, I keep trying to put my head around, like, what is it that could put you over the top? Is there an issue that you guys think isn't getting the attention or that you're hearing on the ground that should have gotten more attention maybe?
Well, there are a number of issues that I think bubble up to the surface. So Heritage Action has been on the ground registering voters this year in Arizona and Georgia. We've registered over 80,000 people between those two states. And yes, you hear crime, you hear inflation, you hear the border issues generally, but you also hear of things that you wouldn't anticipate. And they can't describe it to you this way, but they'll complain about energy efficiency requirements from the federal government. So they'll complain about their dishwasher taking multiple cycles to clean their dishes. The same is true for their clothes washer and dryer. The conveniences and trappings of modern life. And because of federal government energy efficiency requirements, they have to spend their entire day doing what these machines were supposed to make, a fraction of the time. And so we have been on the ground since June of this year trying to connect the dots between those policies that come from the federal government and that administration to the ills that these people are facing in their daily life. And it is a motivating factor for these folks if you can connect the candidate who has caused that problem. That's not the big three issues that everyone's sort of talking about.
But that's that. I love that because to me, there's issues like we do this morning meeting, and there's a lot of folks in New England where I grew up that make their living on the water. And this sounds really silly if you don't live there, but they've put all these windmill farms out there, right? The blades keep falling off, right, and then creating all sorts of environmental havoc and washing up on beaches and all this stuff. And it's hurting marine life. It's obviously environmentally dangerous. It's dealing with the whales. And fishermen and women are apoplectic about this, and no one will pay attention for it. And I keep saying it's awakening a bunch of people who might have probably out of tradition voted Democrat, but are saying, you know what, too much federal. Same thing that you're touching on. It's like, I didn't see this issue bubble up in a poll, but I can tell you anecdotally that for a lot of people who make their living on the water, it's a big deal.
Well, and Trump may have heard that. He may have heard that on the ground in New England because he's been talking about it. He talked about it with Joe Rogan. He wants to be a whale psychiatrist.
Don't you think that's what's so beautiful about Trump? Is that, like, he's a guy, he said, you know how I came up with this no tax on tips? I'm talking to a waitress, I think it was, who said the following. And it's like, dude, that's like, wow, you have a problem, I can be the solution. That's the problem with Washington right now.
Yeah.
Is we're all like, no. I know the answer, you quiet down.
He's the common man billionaire. I mean, he can speak to anyone of any walk of life and talk to them about the things that matter to them, that are causing them strife in their daily lives, right? That's what we're all consumed by these days. And Trump is offering them solutions, or at least a hope, versus the Kamala campaign of nothingness. It's a vibes campaign only.
I tell you what, I also find, again, ironic is that, look, this problem of overregulation, overtaxation that we have from the federal government also applies to many of the blue states. And that actually is going to help Trump because, what has happened? We've seen population flight from states like New York, Illinois, California. The result of that has been after the last census, they lost seats in the U.S. House. All of those states, that affects the Electoral College. Kamala Harris is going into this campaign, even if she's going to win those 3 states, but she's going in with 3 less Electoral College votes than Biden because those state governments have driven people out into the red states.
Reagan, you happen to be the only woman here, so I want to talk about the gender gap. Yeah, there you go. We're going to give you the gender gap question.
Well, how do you know we don't think we're women?
True. My apologies, Hans. Do either of you identify as a woman? Can you define a woman? Okay, good. The gender gap becomes a sort of a media fascination. But it is amazing the number of women that I have come into contact with who have reached out to me or just in passing. And again, it's anecdotal.
Right.
But older, younger, it's not an age thing, who said, I got to be honest with you, Sean, because they all feel like I'm somehow their political confessor. Like they come to me, they go, I wasn't with Trump, I didn't like your guy, I've never been with your boss, but I'm telling you, I'm with you this time. And I'm like, okay, thank you, great, I'll take the vote. But they were like, Kamala couldn't close the deal. Do you think that I'm just hearing that because people want to tell me out of like, I don't know, because they just want me to know? Or is it something that you find among your peer group and others?
That's an interesting question. I think there are 2 parts I can answer this in. On Kamala couldn't close the deal, I think that Kamala Harris is aware. I think that, to your point of, these undecided voters, what's the thing that might sway them? I don't think the Harris campaign knows what the message is because they pivoted to this, threat to democracy messaging. That's what Biden was using, and it didn't work out for President Biden. He's not running anymore. It was something that advisors were warning against. And then now they're putting out these weird ads that are basically the main theme of, you can vote for Kamala Harris and not tell anyone. Don't worry. It's okay to vote for Kamala Harris. It's acceptable. That's weird.
Isn't that a tell? It's almost like our message isn't working, so we're going to try this again. Don't tell anyone that you're listening to us.
Yeah.
And I actually, to be honest with you, I thought the ad from Julia Roberts was kind of insulting both to men and women. It's like, women, like, this was like a throwback, right? It was like, women, I know that your man will tell you how to vote. And men, they're probably lying to you. I was like, this is kind of icky on multiple levels.
Well, I think it gets at this point of politics becoming a religion of the left. You're going to break up families, friendships, and your communities and your circles. And that's what they're leaning into that message, right? These ads, to your point, are speaking directly to that, rather than come together and we're all going to be friends even after Election Day, despite who's in the White House.
Sean, can I add something about the women quick? Just on the women whole aspect of this, we've seen Kamala Harris kind of make this pitch to suburban women, and I've seen this kind of talked about in the media that if Harris does win, that this might be the dark horse, the Suburban Women. She's brought Liz Cheney on the trail to kind of try to cater to Republicans who aren't really feeling like Trump is their guy, and that it's okay to, once again, it's okay to vote for Kamala Harris. In that Des Moines, Iowa poll that, everybody is saying is an outlier, the Trump campaign is saying an outlier, Harris is leading older, senior suburban women by 40 points. And so one thing I think that's definitely worth it to look at today is how Trump ends up doing in Iowa. And that will tell us whether this poll is on par or not and whether her pitch to women made sense.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't mean to sound, because I can be petty, so I'll be honest. But I'm like, if the Emerson poll showed 10.5 in Iowa, I think every other poll, and like for some reason that wasn't considered an outlier because it was Ann Seltzer. Like I have a feeling, we'll know in a couple hours, that if she's wrong. But the second that it became good news for Harris and bad news for Trump, it was like, we're going to run with this, we're going to take it. All right, I want to kind of pivot in a second. If we can put ourselves, let's just play both sides of this for a second. Let's assume, just for fun, that Kamala Harris wins. What did she do well and what did Trump do wrong? Just what would you say, analysis-wise? They call you, Hans, Thursday and said, we need one thing that she did really well, one thing that Trump did wrong. If she were to win, what would you say?
Well, I think if she wins, it may be because this basic lie that they pushed and that all her allies in the media pushed, that he's a budding dictator, right, may have worked. I think Trump's done a very good job in this campaign, but I think if he loses, it might be because I think the simplest message might have been the kind that Ronald Reagan gave, which is, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Because I think the average person going into a polling place and answer that question is going to say no.
And I'd like to begin with a very simple question, very simple. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
And to be clear, he's used it, but he hasn't, I'm with you. I tweeted this out this morning. It's plain and simple. If you like the last 4 years, vote for her. Right. If you like the 4 years before that, vote for him. Let the results stand. Ryan?
Yeah, I think she has done well in bringing a message that she sort of sticks to. She doesn't have a platform or policy positions that she is advocating for, but certainly the vibes of her campaign are something that the American people would tune into. On Trump, I think that this has been something that has been widely discussed, but in the waning week of the election, I think he could have been tighter, right? The Lancaster rally that he did and the news that came out of that. We know that those clips will be cut and sold by every major media outlet in the country many times over. And so going into the last week of the election, just tighten that stuff up. That's what I would say to the Trump campaign.
I think what Trump could have done better is try to define Kamala Harris quicker. There seems like there was just way too long of a time when Kamala Harris entered the race and to let her ride this honeymoon before they started to figure out how they were going to hit Kamala Harris. Similar to your point, I think what Kamala Harris did do well is the vibes, and we like to make fun of it. But especially with young people and women, the social media presence and the optics of their campaign events, I think, were really well executed. And visuals like that, that's rhetoric. Those send a message, and those play on the minds, and I think that is effective.
Let's flip it. Trump wins tonight. I think he wins big, actually. But let's just say he wins, she loses. What's the takeaway that people point to and say, this is why Trump nailed it and this is why she lost it?
Well, because I think he was he's constantly talking about the issues people are concerned about. The economy, the border, and something that we hadn't mentioned that I think might be a secret weapon with suburban women, which is they're really angry about their daughters having boys in their locker rooms, boys on their athletic teams, and their daughters getting cheated out of college scholarships. Yeah. And I think that actually might be the edge when it comes to suburban women and their vote.
I will be interested, based on the comment that I made to Reagan a little while ago, whether these guys in the media have bought into this, all women are monolithic and they're going to vote just on abortion. Because I think you're right. Ryan, what when we flip this, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, to your point earlier about the data, you can't get around the data. The most convincing point of this election, and the thing that I will go back to, is the ground game. Heritage Action's been a part of that. We've been registering voters since June of this year, finding conservative voters on the ground, layering in multiple data sets to identify.
Do you guys feed that back up? Is it just you guys in a vacuum, or does the Team Trump, does the RNC, does data trust the big data cloud for the Republican side? Does that see what you guys are doing?
There has been tremendous collaboration this year, more than any other
Again, this is what the media doesn't take
in.
time to understand. What you're, I mean, we had this issue in 2016 where we were working together with the Trump campaign, and they're like, well, that's not how it's supposed to work. Right. And we're like, okay, but it makes more sense. Same thing with the ground game. If this works, they haven't seen it happen this way, so therefore it can't be, And again, the media looks at everything like a liberal. If there's more people, more money, then that's the right way to do it.
Right, but I don't think they can get around the data this time. And we've proven that the ground game is effective so far. Yeah. Certainly we have election day to get through. But we're leading in a number of states, especially those battleground states in the early vote totals. We've outgained them on voter registration. So I think the ground game this year from the conservative movement, generally speaking, is huge.
And what about her?
I think that she continues to do these great events and gets the media apparatus around her to cover them consistently. But I think that her policy position and the lack of, I actually saw this closing video that her team put out. It's not an ad, but it's like a web video, right? There's nothing in that about the substantive direction of that campaign. And I think people will look back to that and say, I didn't vote for her because I didn't know what she was going to do.
Right. I
know what she believes.
Right. So, Reagan, what about you? If Trump wins, what's the takeaway if she loses?
I think what Kamala Harris did wrong was going on that softball media blitz, because I think she got hit hard during the 60 Minutes interview, and that kind of backfired for her. And I think that gave the Trump campaign the ability to start hitting CBS for being biased. And then she had that moment on The View where she couldn't distance herself from Biden. And I think that's been consequential. My thing that Trump did well, I think you're spot on. I think the ground game has been so much stronger. The RNC has outsourced a lot of that, a lot of the get out the vote efforts to small groups that are on the ground in Pennsylvania and Georgia, Michigan. And I think the media has really tried to draw out that there are Republicans who are disgruntled about this get out the vote effort, that they think going for low propensity voters is the wrong thing to do. Of course, they're going to be upset because something like this has not been done before, and they have nothing to base their experience now on. And so I think that if, Trump made the right call, kind of doing something that's unprecedented, then he's going to be celebrated for it.
All right, I just want to add some context. If you're watching us on YouTube or whatever, the stream will end, and then at 8 o'clock Eastern, we're back live here on the set with guests. The link to that is in the show description. You can do that. If you're watching it on the first, that's awesome. Stay with us all night long. But either way, come back to my YouTube page or across platforms, because we'll be here all night. And I say that because depending on where you're watching us, until we go live at 8 p.m. Eastern, this is what we're right now. Indiana and Kentucky, they're done at 6 p.m. It's like, they're just like, let's get home for dinner. And then at 7 o'clock, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, and Vermont. Okay. 8 o'clock is when we start seeing a lot more of the East Coast. Plus, you start to go out towards, Central and Mountain Time as well. But Pennsylvania, D.C., Delaware, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and all of New England also close at 8. So Hans, what is it that you early on want to see to kind of get a gauge how the night's going to go?
Well, one thing I would warn people on is don't necessarily believe the exit polling.
Oh, God.
Because remember, in 2004, as people were going to sleep, the exit polling was saying that George Bush was going to lose, and he didn't.
Oh, yeah. And they were excited in Boston.
Right.
But what are you going to look for to say, wow, this is going to be a long night, or Trump's headed for a good night?
Well, look, Georgia, I think, is a bellwether. Georgia, remember, he lost that state by, 10,000 votes last time. And if, as it gets late, he is way ahead in that state, that's a pretty good sign that he's going to win. Same thing in North Carolina.
Ryan, what are you looking for, both in terms of, give me one thing that you're looking for?
I think Georgia and North Carolina will be very key to the whole thing. New Hampshire.
You and I, New Hampshire, man. That's
New Hampshire. I mean, you've seen some news already today about Dixville Knox coming out 3-3.
3-3.
A split, 100% change from 2020. But the numbers in New Hampshire look good. We're up in early voting in New Hampshire.
If he wins New Hampshire, start drinking. It's going to be a great night, and we'll know. I mean, look, New Hampshire is an 8 o'clock state. It's small, so we get in. Reagan, what's that one thing you want to see tonight to get a sense of whether you're up all night drinking coffee or you're switching to an adult beverage?
You mentioned Virginia, so I'm going to be different and go with Michigan. The Muslims in Michigan have
8 o'clock state Eastern, by the way, except for that little.
So you might be up a little bit later trying to figure out what's going on in Michigan, but I think the Muslims in Michigan are running a really interesting protest effort of Kamala Harris. They've done a lot of statistics and run, different data sets to determine that if 75% of their community turns out, there's a 99.9% chance that Kamala Harris will lose the state. And so to do so, they're barnstorming mosques and having get out the vote sermons and have targeted a bunch of different areas where they are trying to turn people out. This is this organization Drive for 75. They really had me convinced when I spoke to them about it. And so I'm curious to see if they're able to get there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of groups that are working. That's a big tell. All right, guys, thank you all for being here. Appreciate you guys at Heritage having us and hosting us. We're here all night long. Remember that if you want to stay with us, the link is in the bio. You can stay live with us all night long. You can check us out on the First, Channel 347 on DirecTV and all the other platforms. But we're here all night. Where I go, you go. I'm on Megyn Kelly. You'll be on Megyn Kelly. Well, not actually, but you'll see it. But that's the point. Stay with us all night. We'll have insight, results, you name it. Stick with us. We got a great, great night ahead for you. Thanks for being with us. All right, I want to thank the panel for us, and I want to thank Heritage Foundation for what an amazing evening we have here. We're able to bring it to you live because of the Heritage folks. It's not just the great guests. They have been amazing hosts. We're going to be here all night. So stay with us on YouTube. All of our platforms, like I said, we're going to have it covered for you from every angle, bringing in guests. When I go on Megyn Kelly, if you stay here, you'll watch Megyn Kelly and I interact with the team from the morning meeting. This is the best part about it. So stay with me all night long here. If you're watching on the First, we've got a great lineup headed all night as well. So that's the best part. Stay with us. You're going to love how we cover this thing, the predictions, the insights, the guests, etc. Stick with us all night long. I think we're in for a great night. Thanks for being with us. Tune in tomorrow for the morning meeting because we're going to have analysis as well. And by the way, we'll break this down no matter what tomorrow night at 6. But we've got a big night ahead for you. Stick with us all night long. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.